Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today. I love that my first panel at South by is happening in a room with a disco ball. I feel like this is the perfect way to kick things off. Like you said, my name's Madison Mills. I'm an anchor at Bloomberg Quicktake. I'm thrilled to be joined by you today, Kirk. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Kirk has done pretty much everything that everyone in this room can do in terms of marketing and branding. He's really done it all. But what fascinates me even more about you, Kirk, is your telecommunications background. You've literally worked at all the telecoms companies. Your resume is super stacked. You've gone from Sprint to Samsung to now, of course, AT&T. So that's where I want to start our conversation today, because I imagine you've had a lot of access to data throughout all of those roles. To what extent do you leverage data today as you're kind of developing your campaigns?
Thanks, Madison. I have to first note of our headshots over here. Is that not the most beautiful group of people you've ever seen?
Photoshop, guys.
It's a
little bit of Facetune.
It looks like a CNN anchor lineup. Anderson Cooper and I don't know, somebody gorgeous. So I'm pleased to be joined on stage with someone as equally attractive as I am.
Kirk, stop. Don't flatter me. My boyfriend's in the audience. So marketing.
So let's talk about data. We use data constantly at AT&T. We have a tremendous amount of data, more than anyone could ever store, because we have all the data on usage, cell phone usage, cell phone patterns. Some data we can't use for obvious reasons, for privacy reasons, but we have a tremendous amount of data. In fact, it can be crippling in some points.
When does it get to that point where it's too much data and you feel like you need to kind of, as a leader, take a step back from your team, right? And say, we're focused too much on the data and not enough on what resonates with our audience?
Well, you're leading the witness here a little bit, and I know that because we've talked about this, but here's my philosophy on this. As I like to say, it's not the devil is in the details. The devil is the data. We, as the previous speaker mentioned, data is very dangerous for marketers, in my opinion, because we can get so enthralled, infatuated, and lazy because of data. It in some ways, it puts a separation between us and the customer. And we use it because it's so much more comfortable and it's so more personal. But we have to be very, very careful with data in order to make sure that we are not making poor decisions that are not connected to the actual end user.
I guess when I think about what that looks like in practice, that's where I feel like challenges come up, right? So let's say that you are leading a creative brainstorming meeting and you have 2 star employees in the room. One of them comes to you with an idea that is perfectly baked in with data. It's been backed up by a lot of research and the efficacy is there. Another star of yours has an idea that resonates a lot with you on a personal level and a bunch of other team members on a personal level. Which idea do you go with?
Well, this is tough. You said you wouldn't try to stump me here.
Sorry.
Because I am acting as a fiduciary of AT&T, I will probably go with a data-enhanced decision. However, I always think that you need to robustly enhance that data with personal customer insights to make sure that the information you have is indeed what's going on.
Well, I feel like this might be one reason that we've talked about. You have a behavioral psychologist on your staff at AT&T, which I find so interesting. I feel like we could all use more therapists in general in every area of business. Take me into the impact that person has had on your team. What is the single biggest change that you've made because that person was in the room?
Yeah, not on our staff. I don't want to mislead anybody, but somebody we rely on a regular basis. His name is Isaac Azen, and he is a renowned behavioral psychologist. And he is a part author of the theory of planned behavior. It's important to understand why people do what they do, and it's very difficult to predict from a single stream of data what that is. We know how complex we all are as people, and what we do is influenced by others. The theory of planned behavior basically says it's a combination, it's a three-way combination of what you believe, what other people believe, and how easy it is to make that decision. And those three things go together to create intent, not ultimately purchase, but intent. And you have to understand each of those three aspects of a person's behavior in order to really get to the reason they're doing what they're doing. So it's not a matter of just watching a click-through rate and figuring out that somebody is going to do, that this campaign is working because it has a high click-through rate. You really need to dig in. You really need to understand what's going on a cognitive level with decision makers. That's especially true in business, where we have a much more complex buying cycle, decision-making cycle. But it's true across the board because, as we've talked, consumers and business decision makers, they're all the same.
Right, which is why I think you would argue that your work at AT&T doing more B2B is pretty much the same approach for you as it would be if you were marketing directly to consumer?
Well, in a lot of ways it is, because B2B is, again, it's a gross misstatement of what you're doing. You're still marketing to people, and people are ultimately making the decisions. And those people, just like the theory of planned behavior will tell you, are influenced by other people, as well as their own beliefs, as well as how easy is it to make the change. So if you're talking to a business decision maker, they must understand what they believe. They must understand what their boss believes, what their other colleagues believe. And fundamentally, it may be impossible to make the change or make the purchase because the budget's not there or you're under contract. Those things are really, really important, but they apply to business and individuals equally.
I heard you mention click-through rates, and that a fun marketing buzzword that everyone is worrying about right now. I've got to talk about the data elephant in the room here, right? Obviously, we are way past the days of Congress asking Mark Zuckerberg how he makes money. The answer is obviously advertising, as we all know. It feels like big regulation is coming down the pipeline here, and advertisers, especially from smaller businesses, not AT&T, are going to be really scrambling to figure out a strategy when they don't have access to as much data. So I'm curious for you, do you feel like your human-first approach to advertising is kind of a hedge against tech regulation, specifically on social platforms?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Data has been a crutch. And somebody has kicked the crutch out from under us to a certain extent, and now we have to go back and talk to people. I'm so sorry, but we do. We have to understand what our customers want, what they need, why they think that. We have to go back and talk to people and simply not rely on the data anymore. So if you don't like to talk to people, you're probably in the wrong business. And so yes, it is unfortunate for those of us who, not me, but a lot of people that want to, hide amongst their spreadsheets and make marketing decisions. But it is what it is at this point.
So what's your advice then to the people who do not have your current level of expertise, Kirk, right? Like, what are people supposed to do, especially if they don't have the resources to go out and interview a bunch of people in their target audience? That takes a lot of work and money and time. Where do people begin?
I would say you do have time. You have to make time. You have to spend time with your customers. There's absolutely no excuse from a marketer these days not to be spending time with your customers. And it doesn't have to be a formal $50,000 focus group, but you must get out and understand what they're thinking and use that information alongside the data to help make decisions.
I guess I also feel like consumers benefit a little bit from the oversharing of data. I'll give you all a personal example, right? I trusted Instagram to tell me what to wear on this panel. I love that I got to outsource that decision and not make it myself. Like, I believe that tech knows better than I do what I should be wearing.
It did a nice job, though.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I love a good Instagram ad, and my credit card does not. Kirk, am I an anomaly? Like, does the consumer of 2022 feel kind of down with trading a dash of privacy for a better ad?
We talk a lot about privacy. We talk a lot about cookies and all this strange stuff. But your average consumer has no idea what's going on. They do not know why an ad follows them around. I'm sorry, they don't. They're not in this business and they don't care. They just take advantage of the fact that there happens to be an ad there with them. And maybe if an advertiser is a little excessive, it does get creepy. But they don't know what's going on. They don't care what's going on. They've got other things to think about, right? They've got their lives. So if you're not a marketing person, you're probably very clueless, like our congressmen and women are, about how all this works.
Do you think that also applies then to branded content? Like, we're getting more and more used to, again, buying whatever our favorite influencers tell us to buy and shopping based on casual ads that you can pay an influencer $5K to produce instead of producing a $5 million commercial. Is that going to become the norm?
So I use this observation principle a lot. And I have observed amongst my own family that when they have the opportunity to consume content, they would rather watch Brent Rivera on TikTok than an actual program that has been produced by Hollywood. And they spend hours and hours, in some cases, watching the same silly prank over and over, of one of these creators over turning on the television. And it's critical that we best understand how to integrate with these up-and-coming influencers in an authentic way, in a way that's true to their brand and true to ours. Advertising is changing so very fast. And yeah, there's a place for a Super Bowl commercial because of the mass audience and the largeness of it all. But most real influential work, as our behavioral psychologists will tell you, is at a very personal level. And that's where we must be.
Yeah, it feels like influencer marketing is just going to become marketing moving forward, right? To what extent do you think about in your work which platforms are worth your time in terms of reaching your consumer? Like, how do you go about saying, okay, Instagram is worth my time, TikTok definitely, but Clubhouse, that's not going to cut it for us? How do you do that?
I'm going to go back to the same point I made in the beginning. You got to talk to people. You got to listen to people. You got to get a room of, in this case, based on the platforms you mentioned, a room of teenagers together and just see what they're talking about and where they're going and what they're doing and why. You cannot look at ratings and 100% base your decision on that, or viewers, or number of completed videos. You've got to talk to people, especially the audience that you're trying to get to, and get in their head a little bit and figure out what they're doing and why they're doing it.
In terms of advice for working with influencers, you mentioned ratings, and it's not like we have Nielsen ratings for influencers. We can't, it's a little bit more difficult to suss out the effectiveness of each individual influencer. Some that have tens of millions of followers don't get a lot of engagement, but if you have 10,000 followers on TikTok, maybe you have 100 fans that will do every single thing that you suggest. So that's confusing, right? There's not an exact strategy for the best possible formula for an influencer. How do you think about which influencers to work with and which ones are kind of worth the time and money?
It is a very difficult thing. It is extremely difficult to understand because what's hot today, tomorrow is not. And it changes very rapidly. You know the answer to that question based on what I've just said. What do you think my answer will be? Talk to people. That's right. That's right. So she gets an A in the class.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think about kind of how influencers are becoming like the new storefront for everything. And I imagine that in the last time that we were all at South by pre-COVID, we were still pitching people on why influencers matter and like what an influencer does. And now that is so hopefully so obvious to everybody. But it does make me wonder the next time we're all here at South by, are we going to be just talking about influencer content and the creator economy only, right? And no other form of marketing is going to exist.
What do you think?
I think that would be the smartest business decision.
Well, there you go.
But I'm not an AVP of corporate brand marketing at AT&T.
Oh, but you're just as smart.
Thank you, Kirk. I appreciate that. And my Bloomberg employees in the front row also appreciate hearing that. I know that I do want to talk about a specific example of how your human first strategy has worked, which I feel like is most prominent in your It Can Wait campaign. It's a campaign AT&T launched to encourage people to not use their phones while driving. Kirk, you had to sell people at your company on pitching consumers to not use your product. How did you get buy-in for that?
Well, the It Can Wait campaign, I can't take credit for that. That started before I got involved. One of the things that we worked on quite intensely was understanding the addictive behavior of our cell phones, and we all know they're addictive. It's hard to put them down. Half of you have them up now. That's fine. No judgment. The addictive nature of the cell phone and how to get people to put it down. What would influence them to put it down while driving? And our longstanding belief was it was a matter of telling them how dangerous it is, right? That it is, you simply cannot drive and text at the same time effectively, and it causes a lot of accidents and your life could be in danger. But that didn't work. What we found out is it was much more important to understand what other people thought about your behavior. So to let other people know that you text and drive was more powerful than your own personal thinking about the danger of it. Because you could self-justify, well, I can do it, I can handle it, I know how to text and drive, I figured it out, I've got this strange way to hold my knee up and balance my coffee, and I can do it all just fine, I've never had a problem. But when the judgment of others is weighed into it, that normative quality, then all of a sudden people go, oh, no, I would never do that. I would never text and drive, because that's just so wrong. And so we began to lean into this idea of what others would say about your behavior instead of simply the dangers of the behavior. And we saw a dramatic shift in the success of our campaign.
So judgment first approach, basically.
We're social creatures, right? You went to Instagram to see what to wear. If they had said something was terrible, you would have listened.
Absolutely.
Right, and so we are very influenced by the judgment of others. Our behavior is nearly equally influenced by others as it is our own personal beliefs.
So I know that you are the anti-data pro-human guy, but looking at that campaign, how did you measure the effectiveness of that? Like, there's not really a way to determine exactly how many people put down their phones while driving, right?
Yeah, that was a challenge for us because you can't sneak into their cars and find out if they're actually not texting and driving. There is some ancillary data about that we could gather from devices in the car, about hard braking, and some of the things that the insurance industry uses for safe driving. Those are more popular now than they were, 3 or 4 years ago. But we still didn't know for certain if we were being effective. And so we had to use a proxy for that, which is the pledge. I pledge not to text and drive. And the pledge, again, using that same approach, was not as much geared towards you, is I pledge for someone else. I pledge for my children. I pledge for my family that I will not text and drive. And so we track pledges, and that's where we saw the dramatic improvement.
How many did you get in the end?
Well over 10 million pledges, and growing. You can still pledge not to text and drive, although we stopped putting as much money behind the campaign, and because a lot of other companies and government bodies and others have caught on and kind of taken the flag from where we were, but it was very, very successful for AT&T to tell people not to use our product. Crazy, right?
Well, it is. I mean, I think it reminds me so much of what Anne was speaking about with the Bloomberg Brand Accelerator study, that, purpose-driven, thoughtful, innovative leadership that's based in humanity is what really makes customers and consumers like a brand, right? Like, consumers will hate a brand if they feel like you're just advertising to them, or worse, we won't feel anything about the brand, right? You'd rather someone hate you than ignore you. I wonder if you can just take me into that pitch process. Like, let's go back to a Zoom meeting with your team here. I feel like that's where good ideas like live or die, right? As a leader, what do you do to ensure that those people-focused ideas are encouraged just as much as the flashy ideas that are data-driven?
It's hard to convince a data-centric individual that is not the sole way to make a decision. It's very hard. So you're right. And you must talk about and personalize it for their own behavior. How do you make decisions? How would I understand why you decided to do that? And you begin to uncover very quickly that all of our decision-making processes are very complex and littered with all sorts of debris that we would have never been able to pick up from data. And so you can begin to help them understand that a model that could help predict human behavior beyond the data is very helpful. It's a different way of thinking, because data is so easy. It's so much fun. You think you know all the answers once you have all the data, but that's not always the case. So just be cautious.
Numbers don't lie until you can use them to prove whatever idea you're pitching.
Numbers don't lie, but people do.
Unfortunately, that is true. Okay, Kirk, wrap us up here. What do you think is the single biggest change that folks in this room can make right now to reach their customers more effectively throughout the rest of 2022?
Oh, absolutely. That's easy. Go talk to them, please. I think I made that pretty clear. Go talk to your customers. Obviously, focus groups and whatnot, but again, even those can be a little bit misleading if you're not careful. Go talk to your customers and understand. Spend time with them, getting to know them while they're making the decisions, and then use that insight and your expertise as marketers coupled with the data to make your decisions. But don't rely solely on the data.
All right, and we're going to wrap it up with a cheeky little game here, Kirk, okay? I want you to, finish the sentence for me, okay? It's going to be like a fun rapid-fire vibe.
This is really dangerous for those of us who know me. It's very dangerous.
Why?
You want a drink for this?
Yeah, right.
Ooh, drinks are here? Okay, I know where I'm going after this. Okay, the biggest 2022 trend in advertising will be...
What did I say before? It was really smart.
Kirk, you're going to have to do the legwork here for me.
Damn. I think I said it was something to do with influencer marketing and the younger age groups. I really think that there's something magical going on with these influencers that are creating content For a while it was the unboxing, and now it's the pranks. And I don't know what it's going to be tomorrow, but there's a power in this group that we need to pay attention to really closely, especially if you're a consumer marketer. A business marketer, I think that there's a learning there. I don't entirely know what it is yet or how to apply it yet, but I still think there's a learning there.
What will be the biggest failure of advertising in 2022 when you look back at it?
Traditional advertising is just such a gamble anymore. Make a big old ad, spend millions of dollars running it with a whole lot of media. It's a gamble. I love to do it. I love to make big flashy ads with beautiful people, but it's a real risk anymore if you're trying to be efficient with your dollars.
It seems really expensive for not a guaranteed payout. Do we want to open it up to Q&A? Do we have some questions from the audience? We have time for 2.
Hello.
You're good.
Hello, Kirk. I'm Christy. I
Hello,
wanted
Christy.
to ask you, you talked a lot about talking to people. And one of the things that we're seeing a lot is communities and the voice of communities. What kind of things are you doing to speak to Black communities, LGBTQ plus communities?
It's a big focus at AT&T to make sure that we're a big company. We represent a large portion of the United States, and whether they like it or not, we're your provider for certain services, and so we have to be representative. And we spend a lot of time talking to those communities to better understand why they do what they do and what matters to them. So yeah, it's really, really important for AT&T. I wouldn't say that we figured it out entirely, but we're trying to.
Be authentic, right?
And be authentic along the way. Part of that is making sure that you have representation in your company that looks like those communities, and you leverage them to help understand what's going on.
Absolutely. We got time for one more. Anybody else? All right, we got one last question. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Brian, and I have a more general curiosity question about the don't text and drive. Can you tell me, when I think of AT&T, I don't think of hardware as much, as I would, think of an iPhone or an Android. Just out of curiosity, is there any sort of conversation with the manufacturers, sort of a collaboration effort with any of them, or was that considered at all?
It was, and we have very strong relationships with all of our manufacturers. But at the end of the day, AT&T felt it was their responsibility to take on that initiative. They invested a lot of money to do that, and they wanted then the halo of the goodness that it created. So there was an expense and there was a benefit for the brand. And while we talked to a lot of the manufacturers, it took us a while to get them to understand. In fact, one year we actually brought our competitors in, and we brought Verizon and T-Mobile into the campaign. They contributed money to the campaign, but then they found out that AT&T was getting the majority of the credit, the brand credit, and so they thankfully declined.